What do you do when your favorite TV show swaps out your beloved characters like socks? If you think cast changes are just a modern problem, buckle up, because the 1970s practically invented the revolving door of TV stardom. Some shows survived, some crashed and burned, and a few even got weirder and wilder. Are you ready to relive the ultimate game of musical chairs, 70s style? Let's count down the craziest, gutsiest cast overhauls in television history and see who really stuck the landing. Three's Company. Let's be honest, Three's Company was less of a sitcom and more of a contact sport behind the scenes. On screen, it was a fizzy, risque farce with pratfalls and innuendo for days, but off-screen, pure chaos. If you thought the biggest drama was Janet mistaking Chrissy's shampoo for whipped cream, think again. The show's biggest plot twist wasn't written by a network exec. It was sparked by a pay dispute that set off a casting avalanche. Suzanne Summers, the iconic Ditz Next Door Chrissy Snow, didn't just want better pay. She wanted equal pay with John Ritter and Joyce DeWitt. Cue network panic, frosty phone calls, and Summers suddenly calling in sick from the set. The solution? Rotate in Chrissy's cousin Cindy by Jenna Lee Harrison, and then nurse-turned-roommate Terry, Priscilla Barnes. If it felt like you were keeping up with the Kardashians of the 70s, you weren't alone. Every new arrival brought a fresh dynamic. Cindy was clumsy, Terry was brainy, and both had to live up to the atomic bombshell shadow of Chrissy. What's wild is how the show's identity twisted with each new lineup. Ratings took a hit, but viewers stuck around just to see who'd show up in the kitchen next. John Ritter's slapstick kept things afloat, but the off-screen battles were as juicy as anything on the tube. Lawsuits, public feuds, and behind-the-scenes ice-outs became legendary. Yet somehow the series stayed fun, funny, and weirdly resilient. Three's Company didn't just change cast members. It turned the process into its own dramatic subplot. The lesson? Sometimes the craziest twists aren't on the page, they're in the paychecks. Charlie's Angels. If you think angel wings can't grow back, you never watched Charlie's Angels in its prime. The original Jiggle TV sensation had America hooked on crime-fighting glamour, feathered hair, and yes, a never-ending parade of beautiful detectives. But what kept everyone talking? The fact that, on this show, no angel was ever safe. Farrah Fawcett's poster was on every wall in America, but just one season in, she was gone, ditching prime time for a shot at movie stardom. Cue national panic. Producers didn't just replace her, they marketed the replacement like a Super Bowl event. Enter Cheryl Ladd as Chris Monroe, the sister of Fawcett's character, bringing the same sparkling smile and even bigger hair. But the merry-go-round had only just started. Kate Jackson by Sabrina left after season 3, replaced by Shelley Hack, then Tanya Roberts. By the end, the show had burned through more angels than a Valentine's Day candy store. Here's the kicker. Every time an angel flew away, critics predicted doom. Instead, the show found ways to spin the chaos into gold, at least for a while. Each new cast member came with a launch campaign, wild promos, and enough magazine covers to fill a supermarket aisle. Fans debated who was the best, who brought the sizzle, and who just felt like a stand-in. The show practically turned cast, swapping into its own ratings weapon. But even the most dazzling halo loses its shine. As the carousel spun faster, the storylines got wackier, the villains got cheesier, and the ratings finally crashed. The final cast didn't feel like the original Angels, but more like a fever dream of what 70s TV thought was cool. Still, Charlie's Angels set the template. No cast is untouchable, but if you swap with style, you can keep fans guessing and watching till the very end. Good times. There's cast drama, and then there's good times drama. The Evans Family was supposed to be the heartbeat of 70s black television, a slice-of-life sitcom with real grit, warmth, and humor. But even the best family portraits can get torn up in the writer's room. John Amos, who played patriarch James Evans, didn't mince words about his issues with the show. He thought the scripts made JJ a clown and turned family hardship into cheap laughs. Amos went public with his frustration, and instead of smoothing things over, the producers decided to kill off James Evans entirely, sending shockwaves through the fan base. Just when audiences were reeling from the loss, another blow landed. Esther Roll, the soul of the show as Florida Evans, walked out herself in protest over the direction of the series. Suddenly, Good Times was a sitcom without its original parents. The show tried to pivot, spotlighting JJ's antics, pushing supporting characters like Bookman and Willona into the spotlight. and inventing new familial bonds. But fans noticed the difference. The sense of family unity, the show's beating heart, had been yanked out. Ratings slipped, critics grumbled, and only after a season in exile did Esther Roll return, trying to put the pieces back together. The irony? JJ's catchphrases and mugging might have kept the series popular in the short run, but it's the chemistry of the original Evans family that viewers remember. The show's identity morphed, and not everyone stuck around for the ride. The lesson here? Cast changes don't just shake up the credits. They can change the whole soul of a show. Happy Days. If there's a Mount Rushmore of TV nostalgia, Happy Days has got to be up there, complete with jukebox, poodle skirts, and the Fonz's leather jacket. But for all its sitcom comfort food vibes, the show's real legacy might just be how often it reinvented itself by changing the cast. At first, Happy Days was Richie Cunningham's coming-of-age story, with Ron Howard anchoring the show as America's wholesome every kid. But as Henry Winkler's Fonzie became a breakout phenomenon, the entire chemistry of the series began to shift. Richie, Ralph Malph played by Donnie Most, and even Potsy played by Anson Williams, started to fade into the background as the Fonz's "I" became a national catchphrase. But then came the real shakeups. Ron Howard and Donnie Most both left after season 7, and the writers had to scramble to fill the gap. Enter Ted McGinley as Roger Phillips, Kathy Silvers as Jenny Piccolo, and Crystal Bernard as K.C. Cunningham. These fresh faces couldn't quite capture the original magic, but the show pressed on, now centered around Fonzie's life lessons and increasingly wacky storylines. There's a reason Jumping the Shark, from that infamous Fonz water ski episode, entered the pop culture dictionary as the moment a show goes off the rails. The constant churn of characters didn't kill Happy Days overnight, but it shifted the series from a cozy slice of 50s nostalgia to a Fonz-centric, almost cartoonish ride. Ratings held up for a while, but it was clear, when you swap the heart of the show, you're playing with fire. Fans may stick around for the ride, but everyone knows when the magic formula's been messed with. All in the Family. Norman Lear's All in the Family wasn't just a sitcom. It was a revolution. But revolutions don't always survive regime change, and this one came with a body count. Jean Stapleton's Edith Bunker was the emotional core of the show, her warmth balancing Carol O'Connor's blustering Archie. But when Stapleton wanted out, the writers made a gut-wrenching call. Edith would die off-screen, and Archie would have to carry on alone. The fallout was seismic. All in the Family became Archie Bunker's place, a show with the same blue-collar DNA but a very different soul. New faces popped up. Danielle Brisebois as niece Stephanie, Ann Mara as a new neighbor, and suddenly, Archie's famous chair felt a little emptier. The bar setting brought in a whole new cast of regulars, turning the intimate family squabbles into workplace banter. Some fans rolled with the changes, eager to see Archie face new challenges in a world moving past him. Others felt the magic was gone without Edith's moral compass. The ratings didn't immediately crater, but the show slowly lost its edge, becoming more of a comfort watch than a cultural lightning rod. Still, there's a lesson in the show's audacious pivot. Sometimes you have to risk everything just to keep the story going. Killing off Edith wasn't just a cast change, it was a creative earthquake. Not every show could have survived that kind of shakeup, but All in the Family gave it a shot, proving that even TV legends have to evolve or bow out. Imagine tuning in every week, growing attached to the wisecracking surgeons of the 40 Outer 77th, and then one by one, your favorites disappear, never to return. That's the roller coaster ride that was MASH, a show that treated cast turnover not as a crisis, but as a chance to reinvent itself again and again. It all started when Wayne Rogers, the original Trapper John, grew frustrated with his second fiddle status and left. Enter B.J. Honeycutt, a softer, more introspective foil to Hawkeye, shifting the tone from hijinks to heartfelt. Not long after, McLean Stevenson's Colonel Henry Blake was written out in one of TV's most gut-punching exits ever, killed off in a shocking twist that left both cast and audience stunned. Radar, Klinger, and Father Mulcahy got bumped up, while new blood like Colonel Potter, acted by Harry Morgan and Charles Winchester aka David Ogden Stiers, helped evolve the ensemble from broad comedy to something closer to tragicomedy. And then there was Frank Burns, the perfect punching bag, replaced by the far more nuanced Charles. Suddenly, the satire got sharper, the drama deeper, and the whole show felt more like a living, breathing organism than a static sitcom. What's remarkable? MASH. didn't just survive these changes, it thrived, reaching new heights of critical acclaim and popularity with each new era. Fans might have missed their old favorites, but the series always gave them a reason to stick around, whether it was Hawkeye's wisecracks or a genuinely moving meditation on war and loss. In the end, MASH proved that a series can change its face and still keep its heart. Sometimes, the only way to stay alive is to keep evolving, even if it means saying goodbye. The Partridge Family. If you ever needed proof that TV kids are more replaceable than a set of car keys, look no further than The Partridge Family. The premise was pure sunshine, a groovy musical family, David Cassidy's perfect hair, and bubblegum pop hits. But behind the scenes, the band kept switching drummers without missing a beat. It all started with Jeremy Gelbwaks as Chris, the youngest Partridge, banging away behind the kit. After one season, Gelbwaks was out, quietly swapped for Brian Forster. There was no teary goodbye, no very special episode explaining his absence. He just vanished, and a new kid sat down at the drums. Fans might have done a double take, but the show rolled on, hitting the same goofy high notes. But the Partridges weren't done playing musical chairs. Susan Day and David Cassidy stayed the course. But Shirley Jones, matriarch and real-life stepmom to Cassidy, occasionally found herself surrounded by new faces, rotating supporting kids, and endless guest stars. It became a running gag. How many Partridge kids does it take to keep the family band together? And here's the punchline. For all the swaps, the show never lost its groove. Viewers were so invested in the wholesome fantasy that they barely blinked when the cast morphed before their eyes. Maybe it was the music, maybe it was the charm, or maybe audiences just wanted to believe that family, even a TV one, could survive any shakeup. The Partridge Family proved you can change the players and still keep the tune. If only real-life families had it so easy. The Facts of Life. The Facts of Life started as a classic case of too many cooks in the kitchen. The first season had Mrs. Garrett juggling a whole dormitory of girls at Eastland School. So many, in fact, that even dedicated fans struggled to remember all their names. The chemistry wasn't there, the storylines felt scattered, and the network was ready to pull the plug. But in an act of TV triage, the producers took a hatchet to the cast and built a whole new show from the rubble. After season 1, nearly all the original girls were sent packing. In their place, Tootie, Blair, Natalie, and soon-to-arrive Joe. With just this core 4, the series finally clicked. The stories went deeper, the laughs got sharper, and viewers connected with the new, tight-knit crew. Suddenly, The Facts of Life was a phenomenon, not a punchline. This was more than a cast change. It was a full-on creative reboot. The audience barely had time to mourn the missing girls before the new lineup stormed in and stole the show. As the years went by, even more changes came, new girls joined, older ones graduated, but the show always found a way to keep its heart beating. It wasn't just about surviving cast shakeups, it was about thriving on them. The lesson here? Sometimes you have to cut loose what's not working and take a risk on something new. If you do it right, you don't just save the show, you make it legendary. The Hardy Boys' Nancy Drew Mysteries. When you tune into a mystery series, you expect suspects and red herrings, not the stars vanishing between episodes. But the Hardy Boys' Nancy Drew Mysteries made cast changes its own kind of plot twist. Premiering in 1977 as ABC's bid for youth-driven detective drama, the show kicked off as a split. Sean Cassidy and Parker Stevenson as the Hardy brothers one week, Pamela Sue Martin's Nancy Drew the next. But TV scheduling is a ruthless beast. Despite Nancy Drew's loyal fan base, her mysteries drew lower ratings, and suddenly Pamela Sue Martin was out, replaced by Janet Louise Johnson. The audience barely got to know the new Nancy before the network axed her entirely, refocusing the show solely on the Hardy Boys. One week you're following two teenage sleuths, the next you're in a completely different universe. And just as you settle in, a main character evaporates. ABC didn't even pretend the whiplash wasn't real. Nancy was simply gone. No big farewell, no wrap-up arc, just a new season opener and a don't ask, don't tell policy about missing detectives. For fans, it was both disorienting and darkly hilarious. If you stuck with the show, you learned to expect the unexpected. Maybe even brace yourself for the boys to go missing next. The result? The show lost much of its early chemistry but limped along on the Hardy Boys' teen idol appeal and a rotating door of guest stars. It became a lesson in how not to handle cast changes. Don't just yank a beloved character mid-mystery and expect viewers to pretend nothing happened. Even in the make-believe world of TV crime, some absences are just too glaring to cover up. Soap. How do you parody the wild twists of daytime soaps? Easy. Just make your primetime sitcom even more outrageous. Soap was the original genre bender, lampooning everything from evil twins to amnesia. But the biggest running gag? The cast changes and character swaps that were as frequent as the show's plot twists. First, there were the departures. Robert Urich's Peter Campbell was killed off, Chuck Campbell vanished, literally, no explanation, and Diana Canova's Corinne left, came back, and left again. Sometimes characters were recast on the fly, like when Donnelly Rhodes stepped in as Dutch. Other times, the show's creators just leaned into the chaos, writing meta-jokes about why so-and-so couldn't be here this week. Soap practically dared you to keep up with its revolving cast, trusting that the breakneck pace and absurd humor would keep you distracted. But this wasn't just chaos for chaos's sake. The cast swaps became part of the show's DNA, mocking the unpredictability of soap operas themselves. One week, a character's in a coma. The next, they're played by someone else, or just gone. Viewers either rolled with it or found themselves hopelessly lost in the show's tangled web. Despite all the turnover, Soap was a critical darling, breaking new ground for LGBTQ+ representation, serialized comedy, and just plain anarchy. It lasted 4 seasons, and if you ask fans today what happened to half the characters, you'll get shrugs and a laugh. In the end, Soap proved that with the right tone, even the messiest cast shakeups can become part of the joke. If you're going to swap your stars, you might as well have fun with it. Laverne and Shirley. They were TV's odd couple. The original working-class BFFs whose Brooklyn accents and slapstick antics made Laverne and Shirley a must-see comedy. But even best friends can't outrun Hollywood contracts, and by the end, the show's biggest twist wasn't on the assembly line, but in the opening credits. After 7 seasons, Cindy Williams, Shirley herself, walked out over creative and contract disputes. The network, desperate to keep the show alive, pressed on with Penny Marshall's Laverne as the sole lead. They kept the and Shirley in the title, but suddenly it was a one-woman show. Writers scrambled to fill the void, promoting quirky side characters to the forefront and introducing new faces, hoping lightning would strike twice. But for fans, something was missing. The show's signature chemistry, the friendship, the banter, the pratfalls just couldn't be faked. Laverne was still lovable, but the balance was gone, the laughter more forced. The ratings told the story. After Shirley left, viewership plummeted, and the show limped through its final season before getting the axe. Still, Laverne and Shirley left its mark as a sitcom that dared to try the impossible. Could you keep the magic alive when you lose half of a legendary duo? The answer, for better or worse, was not for long. But it made for one of the most memorable TV experiments of the 70s, and a cautionary tale for anyone who thinks cast changes are just business as usual. 8 is enough. Family shows thrive on stability. Until life throws you a curveball, no script can fix. 8 is Enough was built on the premise of a big, bustling family headed by Dick Van Patten's Tom Bradford and Diana Hyland's Joan. But before the first season even wrapped, tragedy struck. Diana Hyland was diagnosed with cancer and passed away after filming just a handful of episodes. The loss forced an unprecedented change. How do you continue a series about family when you've lost the mom? The show responded by bringing in Betty Buckley as Abby, the warm, patient stepmother who became the new matriarch. But this wasn't your usual replacement by the numbers. Abby's arrival was written into the story as a delicate, emotional transition, and the writers took care to respect both the real-life loss and the fictional world. And yet, the cast changes didn't stop there. As the kids grew up, some left home or faded into the background, while new love interests and guest stars rotated in. Somehow, 8 is Enough managed to balance its original charm with the reality of growing and changing families. It didn't always land perfectly, but viewers connected with the show's willingness to address change head-on, turning real grief and evolving dynamics into compelling television. In the end, 8 is Enough wasn't just about 8 kids. It was about rolling with life's punches, picking up the pieces, and learning that sometimes the only constant in family is change itself. Barney Miller. If you thought police precincts were all about stability, Barney Miller had other ideas. This classic sitcom was famous for its dry wit, memorable one-liners, and a bullpen full of quirky cops. But beneath the surface, the cast list was as much a revolving door as any station house. First, Abe Vigoda's Deadpan Fish became a breakout hit, so much so that he got his own spin-off, leaving Barney Miller without its most iconic sad sack. Then there was Gregory Sierra's Chano, who vanished after just 2 seasons. Tragedy struck with Jack Sue, whose Sergeant Yamana died mid-series. The show famously broke the fourth wall to honor his passing. Every time a desk went empty, a new character showed up to fill it. Enter Steve Landesberg as the cerebral Dietrich, Ron Carey as the eager Officer Levitt, and others who briefly popped in and out. But here's the genius. Instead of pretending nothing had changed, the show embraced the shuffle. Characters left for promotions, retirement, or even just for a little personal leave, and their replacements brought fresh energy and new quirks. The writers used cast changes to explore new dynamics, poking fun at bureaucracy, turnover, and the absurdity of police life. Fans barely had time to miss the old favorites before they were laughing at the new guys. It was a rare series where change was part of the DNA, and where even after a dozen switches, the spirit and the laughs never missed a beat. Chico and the Man. Few shows have been rocked by tragedy quite like Chico and the Man. The series made history as one of TV's first sitcoms built around a Latino star, the electric Freddie Prinze as Chico. His chemistry with Jack Albertson's cantankerous Ed Brown powered the show through its first 3 seasons, earning rave reviews and a devoted audience. But behind the scenes, Prince was struggling. His sudden death by suicide in 1977 left the cast, crew, and audience in shock, and the producers facing an impossible question. Can you continue a show after losing its heart? In a bold, some would say desperate, move, they introduced a new character, Raul, played by Gabriel Melgar, as a streetwise young boy meant to fill Chico's shoes. But the magic was gone. Albertson did his best to keep things afloat, but the spark that made the original pairing special simply couldn't be manufactured again. Viewers felt the loss immediately, the tone shifted, the jokes lost their punch, and the ratings began to slide. In the end, Chico and the Man stands as a heartbreaking example of how some cast changes are just too seismic to survive. The show limped through one more season before finally calling it quits, a poignant reminder that, in TV as in life, some absences simply can't be replaced. The Bob Newhart Show. If you're looking for a masterclass in subtle cast shuffling, look no further than The Bob Newhart Show. At first glance, the show seemed like the definition of stability: Bob, his wife Emily, and a cast of lovable Chicago oddballs. But dig a little deeper and you'll spot the constant churn just beneath the surface. Jerry the dentist, Peter Boners, would disappear for episodes at a time, only to return without fanfare. Some patients, like the neurotic Mr. Carlin, became regulars after fan feedback, while others vanished into sitcom oblivion. Even Howard Borden, the neighbor pilot played by Bill Daly, started as a bit player before becoming a core part of the ensemble. This quiet cast fluidity let the show continually adjust its tone and focus, fine-tuning the balance between Bob's work life and home life, bringing in new weirdos when needed, and quietly phasing out storylines that didn't land. It's the kind of cast management that's easy to miss unless you're paying close attention, but it's a big part of why the series stayed fresh and funny across 6 seasons. While there were no headline-making firings or tabloid scandals, The Bob Newhart Show remains a lesson in how to keep a sitcom evolving, one small cast change at a time. So, what did these wild cast changes teach us? In the 70s, TV wasn't afraid to roll the dice, even if it meant breaking hearts, bending reality, or swapping your favorite character overnight. Some shows survived and thrived, others crashed and burned, but every swap left its mark on TV history. Which cast change shocked you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more wild stories from TV's golden age. Who knows? Your favorite show could be next.